and then we'll get started again. What I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to cover the portion of the past, present, and future about Lawgiver. And this is a controversial subject, so I need to be thorough about it. But if any of you have any questions, please let me know. I've tried to cover everything that I've anticipated would come up. But if you have any questions, please write them down and get to me with them, please. I love questions. So the next thing we're going to cover is Christ Jesus, the Lawgiver. Now, the law of Moses definitely was the center of Judaism. It defines sin and righteousness and man's relationship with God. Man's sin against God had breached the peace between them, and the fundamental job of the Messiah was to correct that. The other themes portrayed by the titles of Seed and Shiloh explained how this would be done and the role of the peacemaker himself. So, Lawgiver has to involve something different. Also, we must understand something axiomatic. Moses gave the Mosaic law, right? Well, if the Messiah was going to give a law, it would have to be somehow different than the Mosaic law, wouldn't it? I mean, that's a question that legalists and Torah promoters can't bring themselves to answer. However, if the Messiah is to be a lawgiver, then he will have to give laws, right? And the Bible teaches how he will do that. Now, Jeremiah gave a very fundamental prophecy concerning this. Jeremiah 31. If you want to go ahead and turn there, Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah 31, verse 31. It says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." All right? Well, a new covenant is a new covenant, right? Is it the old covenant reaffirmed? No. I mean, that had already been reaffirmed several times, and it was not called a new covenant then when it was reaffirmed. Therefore, a new covenant must be something different. It's new, right? Jeremiah 31, verse 32. "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant they broke, although I was a husband to them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." So, this new covenant was going to involve God writing all of his law inside them. And it would not be learned via teaching. Instead, they all will know it. Therefore, it's going to be part of their nature. So obviously, this is an end times thing. It's an end times promise. So let's think a minute. Can the law that God writes in their hearts be the same law as the law of Moses? Well, dare we even think such a thing? Now, I'm sorry I have to do this, but to deal with the critics, I got to do it, and I have to defeat the error. But it's actually not that difficult to deduce what must be so. All right, let's do some analytical thinking here. When God writes his law in hearts and all know it, that's going to have to be after the resurrections, isn't it? Is that what's going on now? Do we believers know the law innately without being taught it? No. So this is still coming. Now, in 1 Corinthians 13, it corresponds with, we shall know as we are known. That's the same thing. So, does that fact that it's got to be future still change our understanding of Jeremiah 31? Yeah. So here we go. I mean, the truth is compelling me to do this. We're doing some analytical thinking. We're asking questions, and the answers will come, see? So, will the believers in the resurrection be male or female? No. They're going to be like angels, all right? So, logically, the portions of the Mosaic law that deal with the behavior of men and women will no longer apply, will they? If there's no men, no male, or no female, can they? Why? Because there's going to be no more male or female. All right. Now, will believers grow old and have children in the future at the resurrections? No. So the portions of the Mosaic law that deal with families will no longer apply. I mean, families are the life engine for earthly, mortal life. Well, eternal life is going to be different. There won't be any reproduction. Therefore, there's going to be a different life machine that will exist. That's axiomatic. Now, also, will they own land? Will they have fields and grow food? Will they have businesses in our resurrected bodies? No. The tree of life is going to be our source of sustenance, and we're all going to work for God. So that portion of the law will disappear. In fact, the entire civil law will become void. I mean, angels have no use of such things, do they? Now, also, next thing, are they going to make sacrifices in an earthly temple? No. Sin and sacrifice for sin, it's going to be gone. Well, that's the whole ceremonial law, isn't it? Here's a good one. Are they going to worship God just on one day of the week? I mean, the visions in the book of Revelation portray praise in the heavenly temple continuously. I mean, do we have to go on? Who still says that the new covenant that Jeremiah prophesied would involve the old law? The new covenant must somehow involve a new law, because they're going to have the word written in their hearts. They're all going to know it without being taught it. See? I don't think that anyone can logically say it'll be the same. Wow. Jesus taught that the resurrected believers will be like angels. Well, the law of Moses was for people. Now, do angels still live by rules? Yes. Some sinned, right? So they had to have broken laws. And they were cast out of earth with Lucifer, right? But do angels live by the same laws as people do? Probably not. Well, what laws do they live by? I don't know. Has any prophet given them to us? I mean, it's none of our business, other than, of course, we know that they need to revere and obey God. That's obvious. And do angels have free will? Well, if some of them sinned, they must. All right? I mean, this is logical, isn't it? And furthermore, angels can see what's really going on spiritually. So for some of them to have rebelled against God, when they could really see his true magnitude and splendor, that had to be the height of treason. That's logical, isn't it? But what about the rest of the rules for the spiritual realm? Well, I mean, Paul was told stuff in 2 Corinthians he wasn't permitted to speak, right? They have to have laws that pertain to them because some angels sinned, right? 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude verse 6 say that some angels did not even keep their first estate, whatever that is, and they're now in chains. All right, now, I know there are some yes buts forming out there in the audience, but stay with me here, all right? as you come to know me, I try to be thorough, and I'll cover them. I've anticipated some things here. So right now we're still in Jeremiah's prophecy that the new covenant was between God and Judah and Israel. Was it between them and God and the Gentiles? No. It says between Judah and Israel. So the Gentiles were not involved in the prophecy. Okay? And it'd have to be between God and resurrected believers anyway, right? So now, let's take a look at the Torah, all right? The law of Moses in more detail. The law of Moses has been subdivided into 3 general categories by Jewish scholars, all right? The people that propound the law, all right? Them. They say there are moral laws, which are primarily the 10 Commandments. There are ceremonial laws, primarily concerning sacrifices in the temple. And then there are civil or societal laws governing the proper interactions between people. Now, some say that there is a total of 613 commandments in the Torah. That number was taken from a very detailed list in the Talmud, which is Jewish oral law and commentary. I think there really probably are fewer than that because the wording on some is very close. For example, in one instance, they count one commandment saying to love something, and then the next commandment is to not hate. The same thing. Well, I'd say those are the same, but a hardcore legalist would say, no, they're separate. So somebody said that this was because 613 is 365 for the days of the year, plus 248 for the number of bones in the human body. But that's wrong on both accounts, because the Jewish year is 354 days. They wouldn't have conceived of the year at 365. And because they observe a lunar calendar, all right? And there aren't that many bones in the human body. There's fewer than that. So somebody was just casting about for something to add it up. But if we look further at that list of 613, it can be divided into categories. So I'm going to give you a listing. I think I'll include it in the handouts here. A listing from one of the Jewish websites. And let's see if they apply to resurrected beings, all right? So the first category, there are commandments regarding reverence to God, all right? Well, those are universal. Love God, eschew idolatry, etc., all right? Then, there are commandments regarding respect for the law. Obey the law, teach it to your children, that kind of thing. Then, there are portions of the law for signs and symbols, like circumcision and fringes on garments. Well, I don't think that applies to angels. So, will angels be circumcised? I ain't touching that. Okay? I mean, are they going to have nails? Same thing. I ain't touching that either. But, no, laws regarding prayer and blessing, reciting the Shema, or having grace at meals. We'll be praising God in the future. But love and brotherhood, for example, don't ignore those in trouble. If you see somebody that's in trouble, you ought to render aid. That's one of the laws of the 613. But wait, there's going to be no trouble in paradise in heaven, right? There's going to be no sorrow, no tears. So will that apply? No. All right, there are laws concerning treatment of the poor and unfortunate. Well, will there be poor in heaven or paradise? No. There's laws regarding the Gentiles. Well, are there going to be Gentiles in heaven or paradise? Believers are going to be there, right? There's laws regarding family. Well, will we be in families? Will there be male and female? No. Okay. There's laws regarding sex. Well, I'm sorry. I don't think there's going to be any sex in heaven or paradise. Reproduction is no longer needed. But bliss will be better than bang. Woohoo! But anyway, times and seasons. Are they going to celebrate feasts and holidays? I don't know. But most of the feasts and holidays are sacrificial in nature, and we're not going to need that. There's dietary laws. Well, we're going to be eating from the tree of life, right? Okay, it's like Iron Chef. The secret ingredient will be, well, it's still a secret, okay. Business, laws regarding business. Are we going to be in business? No. Laws regarding employees, servants, and slaves. Well, those aren't going to be needed. Laws regarding vows and oaths. No, those not going to be needed. Laws regarding the sabbatical years and jubilee years. Well, we're not going to own land, or there's no need for bankruptcy. All right. Laws regarding injury and damage. That's not needed. Criminal laws. Well, there's not going to be any criminals. Restitution and punishment. Well, that's not going to be needed after the second death and the lake of fire. Boom, gone. False and genuine prophets. Well, ain't going to be any of those. Agriculture and animals. Well, I don't know if there's going to be animals or not, but we're not going to be growing crops. Clothing. I don't think that's going to be needed. Won't be supplied. Laws regarding the firstborn. Well, there's no births. Laws regarding priests and Levites and Nazarites. Well, we're all going to be like priests. Laws regarding offerings and taxes. No. Death and taxes will no longer be inevitable. The IRS is going to be burned up in Gehenna. Woo! All right. Temple. There's not going to be a physical temple. So it'll be a spiritual temple. There'll be new rules about that, I would think. Sacrifices. Laws regarding sacrifices no longer necessary. Laws regarding ritual purity. Don't touch certain things. Well, all's going to be pure. Laws regarding leprosy. Well, it ain't going to be leprosy or sickness. Laws regarding how you interact with the king. Well, Jesus is going to be king of kings, so we'll have some rules with that, but I think they might be different. Laws regarding war. No more war. They're going to beat their swords and plowshares. So, how much of the law of Moses is going to be still left after the resurrection? Well, some things are going to apply, but honestly, not very much. So, Jeremiah 31's law in the hearts clearly cannot be the Torah. All right? Now, they may shout blasphemy, but look, I mean, it's logical, right? Their legalism and their aggression maybe do this because they're insisting the Torah is still in effect after the Messiah accomplished his work. And there are groups that are pushing that on everyone. So I've got to take a stand. See, but is the law of Moses evil? No, of course not. But what they are doing with it is clearly wrong. And what I just did was logical and biblical. Right? Even if it's controversial. Now, we have to take into account that there were some portions of the law of Moses that were anticipatory, that would not go into effect until they entered the promised land, or until the temple existed or not. All right? So, maybe there are transitional things with the new covenant of Jeremiah 31, just like there were with the law of Moses. Right? Because, have we gone from the sufferings of the Messiah straight into the glory? No. Why? What happened? Well, the Jews rejected Jesus of Nazareth just like the spies rejected the promised land, and so they didn't enter in but wandered in the wilderness for a while. Well, we're still wandering too until we get into the promised land. So where are we now? Or more specifically, when are we now? All right? Has Jeremiah 31 come to pass? No. The resurrections have not happened yet. The law is not written in our hearts yet. We still have to teach each other to know the Lord. Right? But God has forgiven our sins, and He does not remember them anymore. So can you see? There is some more explanation needed. Whoa, wait a minute. And there's something else. Okay, we are Gentiles. And this new covenant was supposed to have been between Judah and Israel. And God and not us. So what's going on here? How do us Gentiles get in on this new covenant? Or as we call it, the New Testament. Do you see there are some things that we have to piece together from the Bible in order to see what's happened? Okay? And where we are now? See, when we do that, we will clearly understand Jesus' role as lawgiver. So, obviously, the resurrections have not yet happened. But forgiveness of sins has. How did God make that portion of Jeremiah 31's promise come to pass? Well, the Messiah came and fulfilled stuff, right? The Messiah died for the sins of the people. Isaiah foretold that in the forbidden chapter, Isaiah 53, the chapter that the Jews don't like. Take a look. Isaiah 53, verse 4. Isaiah 53, verse 4. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, and we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. So, that is how it happened. The seed of the woman, the desire of all nations, the Messiah who had no sin of his own, was the only one who could pay the price of redemption, which was the death of a sinless man, and redeem us all. So now we have to answer this question. Has the new covenant come? Alright? Well, let's consider the parts. Is the law written in our hearts to the end that we know it, and we don't have to be taught it? No. Are our sins forgiven and not remembered anymore? Yes. So, has it come? Yes or no? Or sorta? Wow. Has it come or not? Well, what did Jesus say? That should settle it. Well, what do we celebrate in the rite of communion that Jesus instituted? Look at Matthew 26. Matthew 26, verse 26. It says, as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and he gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. So, did the new covenant come? Well, partially. How? Jesus fulfilled the law and paid the price of redemption. But did Jesus destroy the law? Or did he fulfill it? Well, let's look at what he said. Matthew chapter 5. Take a look at Matthew chapter 5. Verse 17. Jesus said, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. So, let's look at this. Has all been fulfilled? No. Has death, the ultimate judgment of the law of Moses, been eliminated? No. But some things have been fulfilled, haven't they? See, Jesus gave us a little clue here. See, the key word here, I think, is the use of the word all, till all be fulfilled. I mean, that does imply the possibility for partial fulfillment. Now, of course, the Torah pounders are going to scream, no, no. But there is a principle of biblical hermeneutics which applies. All the verses of Scripture on a specific subject must be understood in harmony. Okay? I call it biblical concurrence. See, if we look at all the verses on the subject, they will explain. If the existence of till all be fulfilled, quote unquote, allows for partial stages of fulfillment. Well, I mean, we actually can answer that right away. Is Jeremiah 31, verse 33 and 34 fully or partially fulfilled now? Partially, right? The word's not written in our hearts that we know it without being taught it, but we have had our sins forgiven. Okay, that's a partial fulfillment. Now, now I know I'm being picky here and kind of insistent, and I believe that you guys are with me, but somewhere down the road this recording is going to be heard by someone who has a different opinion, and that's why I got to take this step by step. And see, now, that person of a different opinion is still going to be a believer, and they won't be an evil person. You know, they'll be somebody who loves God and is trying to be right. They were just taught different. Consequently, they're going to need to see my logic step by step. So, do we need to do animal sacrifices? No. Why? Because Jesus died for us as the ultimate sacrifice, right? So he fulfilled that part, right? Well, if he did fulfill that one part, what else did he fulfill? Okay? Because everybody agrees we don't have to do the sacrifices. Well, he fulfilled that. Well, what else? Okay, here's where the rubber meets the road, all right? If the sacrifices are no longer necessary, then that takes the feasts with them. Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. Do we need to observe those? No. Why? Because the major feasts are all built around sacrifices. So if the sacrifices are no longer necessary, then the feasts are not either. Sorry, but it has to be true. If the major feasts are obsolete, the minor feasts go too. So, now, this is no problem for us, but there are some Christian denominations that are screaming, no, no, namely Messianic Jews. Well, look, I mean, they are our brothers. Romans 14 describes how I need to treat them, but it also says how they must treat me. I'm not going to invade their church and teach this stuff. Look, okay, I want to try. If they want to live under the law, I can't stop them. Romans says I'm not supposed to put a stumbling block in their way. But they also have no right to judge me. So why am I teaching this? Because they are causing our believers to stumble. They are intimidating and condemning people who do not observe their law. So, I have to teach this stuff clearly, step by step, so our people won't stumble. You see, when I was down in Central America, there was a big problem with Christian legalists propounding their stuff and causing believers to question grace. Now, I tried to help by giving them some pointers when I was there. But, what do you say when your opponents will not recognize the authority of Paul the Apostle? Because I was quoting stuff from the New Testament, and they said, well, Paul the Apostle, he was a liar. We don't believe in him. So they were putting the believers at a disadvantage because they discredit Paul's epistles. So I told the believers down in Central America I would work on this and get back to them. And I worked on it, but the door didn't open. Well, now the door is opened. Okay? And what I did in the past 15 minutes is I refuted the Torah promoters' position, not based on Paul's epistles, but based on Jeremiah. Look, but are those legalists evil people? No. They're believers doing what they think is right. Well, so was Saul. I mean, he was a student of Gamaliel, who required his students to memorize the law and the prophets. That's what Gamaliel did. But was Saul right when he persecuted and killed Christians? No, I mean, Jesus had something to say about that when they met on the road to Damascus, didn't he? Well, Saul suddenly saw he was wrong. Well, this teaching now is the Torah pounder's epiphany on the road to Damascus. After that, Saul reshuffled all that massive knowledge that he had into proper perspective, and then he was able to mightily prove that Jesus was the Christ. But Jesus didn't stop there, Because at the same time, at that same meeting, Jesus said he'd be appearing to Paul more. He said so. Well, what did Jesus teach him next? The epistles that Paul the Apostle wrote were what he learned direct from Jesus. So we ought to consider what Paul taught. Okay? So what did Paul teach? Romans 14, verse 5 and 6. He said, one man esteems one day above another. Another esteems every day alike. Well, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regards the day regards it to the Lord, and he that regards not the day to the Lord doth he not regard it. And he that eats, eats to the Lord, for he gives God thanks. And he that eats not, to the Lord he eats not, and gives God thanks. Okay? Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 and 17, it says, Let no man therefore judge you in meat, or in drink, or in respect of a holy day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath, which are a shadow of things to come. But the body is of Christ. We'll get back into that in a little bit. So Paul taught that we no longer need to respect the holy days. He even went further and spoke of the Sabbath. Well, let's take that off the table for a moment, okay? We'll get back to it. Because we have to solve the dilemma first. We need to look back at what Jesus said in Matthew. Because in Matthew chapter 5, verse 19, Jesus said, Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Well, was Jesus speaking of Paul? Some legalistic denominations say yes. Some of them even want to eliminate Paul's books from the Bible. They call Paul a hypocrite and a liar. They say that Paul contradicted himself because in Acts 20, Paul said he wanted to go to Jerusalem by Pentecost. So they say, look, Paul observed the feasts. Well, was Paul right in going to Jerusalem? No. It clearly was against God's will. I mean, how many times did God warn him? Yes, Paul made a big mistake going to Jerusalem, but that one mistake is no cause for proving everything that he taught was wrong. Let's add one more thing to the subject. Paul learned what he wrote in the epistles from Jesus. I mean, if you've listened to the one body of original Christianity teaching, you'll have heard ample proof for that, but look at Galatians chapter 1. Galatians chapter 1, verse 11 and 12. It says, But I certify you, brethren, the gospel that was preached of me is not after man. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by revelation of Jesus Christ. All right? And that revelation of Jesus Christ is not a genitive of relation, because it's parallel with Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, that says that God gave the revelation to Jesus, and Jesus gave it to his angel, and then it got to John the Apostle that way. So, I think that's how all the epistles came. See? So, Paul got his information that he wrote from Jesus. Was Jesus contradicting himself between the epistles and what he said in Matthew 5:19 about breaking the least of the commandments? Well, that can't be so, right? There's got to be some things to consider here. So, we need to address them step by step. Of course, what I'm going through may be some things that you may never have gone through in your thinking. So, I need to give you time to consider this. See? So, I'm not going to force this on anyone. We're just going to go through it and see what the Word says. You see, something happened that fits with this past, present, and future theme that we've been pursuing. Something had to have changed on the day of Pentecost. But that was unexpected because it involved the great mystery. You know, remember, so much was fulfilled, it caused wind. Therefore, I am not going to condemn people if they don't understand it all yet, or if they need more time to consider it. Because you know what? It even took the apostles a while to grasp what changed on Pentecost. So who am I to condemn folks if they need some time? I mean, here's a prime example. When could the Gentiles start getting born again? On the day of Pentecost. I mean, God even signaled outreach to the Gentiles with the Gentile tongues on that day, right? But how long did it take till the house of Cornelius incident when the Gentiles finally made it? Over a decade. So, it even took the apostles that long. So, if it took them that long, I am not going to bug anyone who's not with me 100% right now, okay? It may take some time. So, now, here, let's review some stuff before we go on, right? Number one, Jesus fulfilled the law, right? He said he came to fulfill it, right? Well, which law? Well, the law of Moses was the only law that was then, right? Well, when? When did he fulfill it? We're going to have to find that out, all right? Then, the law had three general divisions: the moral law, the ceremonial law, and the civil or social law. Well, since Jesus fulfilled the law, do we need to observe them as Christians? For example, all right, reviewing this, the ceremonial law dealt with sacrifices in the temple. Does that apply? No. Well, if that doesn't, what else doesn't? All right. How about the moral laws? Is it okay to covet or lie or steal or murder now? Well, I don't think so. I think one can basically sum them up in love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I mean, if we do that, will we violate the moral laws? All right? The times and conditions in ancient Jewish society were far different than the society we live in. So do the civil and social commandments still apply? Again, many of them are practical, and the principles have transferred to conditions today. In fact, they actually are the foundation for civil laws in our society today. But we actually could sum up them in love your neighbor as yourself. So, Jesus fulfilled the law of Moses, yes. But are there still elements of the law that we ought to observe? Let's take a look at that. All right? More coming. Next thing, number 3. The Jews were expecting a new covenant to be instituted at the resurrections. One that would be written in their hearts, not taught to them. In other words, they wouldn't learn it like information's normally transferred, but they all would know it from the least to the greatest. And this would be made possible because their sins would be forgiven and remembered no more. Well, did that happen as expected? No. Only part of it happened. Well, what was the significance? We'll have to figure that out. Next thing, number 4. If all of Jeremiah 31 had come to pass, we have seen that the law of Moses would be largely obsolete, for it regulated physical human beings, not angels. Hence, a new law, obviously, would have to be given to us as angels. Does the word speak of this new law? Yes. Where? Be patient, we'll get to that. But it would have to come via the Messiah because he's a lawgiver. So, if Jesus is a lawgiver, what laws did he give? So that's where we're going to go to next. All right? Jesus fulfilled the law. All right? He said that he would in the Sermon on the Mount. Well, when I did my initial work on the Sermon on the Mount, I anticipated that even though I had seen many gems and beauties therein that I wrote in my books, there probably would be more, many more. And one of the areas that these probably would be in would be ramifications of how the Sermon on the Mount capped and summed up the themes in the Old Testament. All right? Now, I am not a legalist. I've seen what religious abuse can do to people. And since I was socially abused growing up and bullied so bad, I've taken a stand against such things. So, I didn't get very deep into the law. But God's law is not evil. It's not abusive. What men have done to it is. Anything of God is inherently profound and beautiful, intricate and perfect. And there are genuine scholars of God who have dedicated their lives to understanding His laws because they are a reflection of God's holiness, compassion, and mercy. And I'm sure they could go on, extolling its beauties and teach far more than me. See, what I'm doing in this teaching is surveying things from 10,000 feet up, similar to them, centering on the law. And in my ministry, I've concentrated on the beauties and intricacies of the great mystery, the one body. But now that the subject of the lawgiver is opening up to me, knowing the genius of Jesus, I had expected one day to learn such things, so this is a real treat to begin to see Him now. So, what did Jesus really say and mean in Matthew 5? He said, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say to you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." Well, how is that going to happen? The Pharisees were already excruciatingly observing the law, and they'd even added stuff like fences around it to try to ensure that it wouldn't even be broken. For example, Eve said, "Don't touch it." Well, that was an added prohibition for extra protection in a similar fashion. See, in Matthew 5, Jesus explained how, in the next 6 examples, how this would be. He used that repetition. You've heard it's been said, but I say to you. So, and each of the examples are delivered in his characteristic Semitic fashion, in this case, utilizing Semitic hyperbole. That is, stating each in the light of its most extreme example. And the logic in the Semitic mind would be, if it applies in the greatest circumstance, it'll certainly apply in all lesser. That's Semitic hyperbole. So, now, this is concerning the law, right? So there's 3 ways of cataloging the law: moral law, ceremonial law, and civil law. Well, there's other ways of cataloging it. Positive commandments and negative commandments is another. What to do and what not to do. Another way of looking at the law of Moses is casuistic law, or case law, which concerns a conditional statement and a type of punishment to be meted out. So, if this, then that. And then the other part of it is apodictic law. That is, regulations in the form of divine commands. But here in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus cataloged the law into 6 divisions. Right? Why 6, not 7? The law of Moses deals with man. 6 is man's number. These divisions are set off by the repetition, "You've heard it's been said, but I say to you." Well, who had said it before Jesus? The scribes and the teachers of the law. So here, Jesus is superseding them. Wow. He is greater than all the rabbis who contributed to the Talmud, and he's adding nuances now to the law. So let's add this new perspective. The first section in Matthew 5 deals with moral law. "Thou shalt not murder" is the greatest one of these. Now, I know sin is sin to God, but to us man, murdering is greater than lying, coveting, or stealing. All right. So if these principles apply for murdering in this first section, then they all apply for the rest of the moral law. So, verse 21, Matthew 5:21. You've heard it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill, or murder is actually, and whosoever shall murder shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, thou shalt be in danger of the council. Rakah comes from spit. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way first. Be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver to thee the judge, and the judge deliver to thee the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say to you, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. Now, so the letter of the law is do not murder. The spirit of the law is, if that's so, we ought not to kill each other with words. Now, I go through this a lot more in my book on reversing religious repression in this section. But if that's the case with the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, the rest of the moral laws should follow suit. See, this is a Semitic form of education. All the variations are not trotted out for us to memorize. We're supposed to apply the wisdom deduced here to the rest, because Semitic learning is earned. So, now the next category of law is relations with others. The greatest interaction of relations with others is sex. There are various prohibitions, etc., about sex, but the essence is, do not participate in improper sex. Adultery is given as the example. Therefore, in accordance with Semitic hyperbole, if we can conquer the passions as strong as sex, what else can we do in all the other forms of interaction between people? So this is Jesus' cataloging of the law. Matthew 5:27. You've heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. If your right eye offend you, pluck it out, and cast it from you. For it's profitable for you that one of your members should perish, and not that your whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Well, are there skeletons in Judea from the first century with people's hands cut off? No. This is Semitic hyperbole. Alright? This is a figure of speech. See, the letter of the law is do not commit adultery. The spirit of the law is, if that is so, we ought not even to think it. Why? Because adultery starts out in the lust of an undisciplined mind. And then this concept expands into the eye and the hand. If your eye offend you, if your hand offend you. So it is talking about thinking and actions in general and not just adultery. See? That's the clue that brings in the rest of this category of interaction between people. But they all start out in the mind, don't they? See? So this covers a host of interactions with people that are of lesser nature than sex. So, but if we can harness that and discipline our minds, we ought to do the same for all the rest of the interactions, and that is the civil law. Right? The next category of law is relations with families, the greatest interaction of which is marriage and divorce. The letter of law has allowed divorce, but the Pharisees had abused it. And Jesus said, it has been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say to you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her, that is divorce, commits adultery. So, marriage is the greatest familial act. If it is handled properly, all the other familial issues shall go along likewise. Next category that Jesus put the law in is oaths. Now, this kind of might seem a little strange at first. However, I believe that this is referring to ceremonial law. When people made sacrifice for their sins at the temple or tabernacle, part of that process was their promise to live better. Wasn't it? Well, that's an oath, isn't it? So, the letter of the law was, do what you have promised. See? So, and the spirit of the law is, that ought to be applicable in all matters. See? So that's the ceremonial law. Now, Jesus said, verse 33, Matthew 5, you've heard it been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but thou shalt perform unto the law thine oaths. But I say to you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst make your hair white or black, but let your communication be yea, yea, and nay, nay. So if you mean yes, say yes. If you mean no, say no. For whatsoever more than these comes of evil. So, consequently, the spirit of the law is, since we ought to deliver on what we've promised God and not live by a double standard, we ought to do what we promised in everything. All right? Isn't this interesting how Jesus divided this? That's what these you've heard us been saying, but I say to you statements are. He's giving the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and at the same time, he's giving his classifications in general. The fifth category in Jesus' summary of the law is regarding civil law. Another part of civil law is an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But the spirit of the law takes things further, to not let evil pervade at all. See? Because we and God can overcome evil. He said in verse 38, you've heard it's been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, you resist not evil, but whosoever shall touch you, it should be, on the right cheek, turn him the other also. See, it's not talking about getting beat up. If you look up the word cheek, there's something in Chronicles and something in Isaiah. And the context in both is it is a way of showing shame or disgust. It's like giving somebody the finger, basically. And Jesus said, turn him in the other cheek also. Like, I'm not going to let this escalate. It doesn't matter to me. And if any man sue you at the law and take away your coat, let him have thy cloak also, because they use the coat for security. And so, look, you don't trust me? Well, take my cloak also. See? And whoso shall compel you to go a mile, go with him too. The Roman soldiers would make people carry stuff, just like the cross that Jesus bore when he couldn't bear it. They called Simon of Cyrene, you, grab this, carry it. See? Same thing. All right? And so, if the Roman soldier came up to you and said, you, carry this. Well, they had a rule for no abuse. They actually had mile markers on the roads. They had a machine that was trailed behind a horse that had gears in it and measured a mile. And they had mile markers, believe it or not. So, the rule was, you can't make somebody carry it longer than a mile. So if the Roman soldier came up to you and said, you, carry this. So who's in charge there? The Roman soldier. You know, they're the persecutor, they're the abuser, right? Well, what if you said, okay, sir, I'll carry it too. Now who's in control? You are. You've just stopped evil in its tracks. And that's what these three examples are talking about. If somebody touches you on the cheek, well, don't participate. Don't give them the finger back. Don't let it escalate. See? You take charge. Don't let evil take charge. See? Give to him that asks of thee, verse 42. And from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. So, I covered this more in reversing religious repression. But the spirit of the law is you take control and let good overcome evil. See, the final category here is regarding revenge and war. Now, these are extremes in human behavior, and it comes full circle to the first and great commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. So, the spirit of the law is, if somebody truly loves God and their neighbor, then they can even love their enemies. Verse 43, you've heard it's been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Because if you love them that love you, what reward do you have? Don't even the publicans the same? Even the Democrats. And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans? So, if this works in that extreme, it will work in everything else. Then finally, Matthew 5:48. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. So that confirms that the law is a reflection of God's holiness and perfection. So, Jesus came to fulfill the law. So we have more to discuss here, but I want to take another break here because it's been an hour since we took the last break.